For academic freedom on campus, time, place, and manner all matter. Students who have been protesting the actions of Israel in its war with Hamas, which is an occurrence mostly at elite and extremely wealthy universities, have set up encampments that violate university policies, and therefore have been sanctioned, for example, at Columbia and Princeton and elsewhere. Now, given this context, it's important to ask a basic question. Is all expression on campus, anytime, anywhere, and by any means, protected speech? Let's take as an example what transpired on March 15, 2024, when Harvard Medical School held its match day. After months of applications and interviews, students and their loved ones were finally able to celebrate the day they found out which hospital they would be training at for the next few years. According to the Boston Globe, students and faculty protested the speaker, the president of the American Medical Association, because the AMA declined to consider a proposed resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza that would allow Hamas to continue with its horrors, including exploitation of hostages and human shields, and its own genocidal designs, as spelled out by the Hamas Charter. The AMA Board of Trustees affirmed its, quote, commitment to medical neutrality, the principle of non-interference with medical services in times of armed conflict, end quote. The Boston Globe noted, quote, students and family members walking into the normally celebratory annual event were greeted by a wall of mostly silent protesters bearing signs saying, "Let Gaza live," and "AMA is complicit in genocide." Also, quote, students unfurled a large banner from the balcony inside and the building's atrium that said, "AMA is complicit in genocide." Now, oddly, the disruptors taped their mouths because they were plausibly believing that they had somehow been censored by the Harvard Medical School because Dean George Daly sent a message days before reminding the school that, quote, mutual respect and public discourse university guidelines would say that disrupting school events could be punishable and that such violations could have, quote, long-term professional consequences, given the questions asked in future physician licensure and credentialing applications. So Daly's warning regarding disrupting the match day ceremony is an example of the fact that, given the vast opportunities for protected public demonstrations, universities also have reasonable policies about time, space, and manner restrictions on speech that prevent the disruption of ordinary scholarly educational activities of a university itself. Every institution must have policies that enable it to operate without unreasonable disruption. Time, space, and manner policies are designed to do just this, to comport with the First Amendment at public institutions and with free speech policies at private institutions. They should be explicitly content neutral, meaning they apply no matter the ideological content of that speech, whether radical left-wing international socialism in Marxist examples, or radical right-wing national socialism, for example, Nazism, or whether talking about theism or atheism's materialism. Having reasonable time, space, and manner policies is what actually sustains possibilities for exercising academic freedom. Otherwise, a university would have no content-neutral procedures and structures to support open inquiry and civil discourse. Every speaker could be heckled into silence, every square inch of university property, and every hour of the day could be commandeered for biblical sermonizing or secular post-colonial preaching. FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, has noted that, quote, the First Amendment does not require schools to allow protests in the dead of the night. Similarly, many schools have narrow policies that prevent disrupting classroom lectures, blocking hallways or routine walking pathways between buildings, using bullhorns to disrupt educational events, protesting in administrative buildings where people work, or setting up indefinite 24/7 encampments that prevent others from using university property. For instance, Harvard disciplined students who had a few months ago violated policies and interrupted classrooms with protests and, despite warnings, protested in the central administrative building where staff have been working. By providing a reminder of the school's policies, thereby preventing more sensational and flagrant disruptions of the ceremony, Dean Daly probably saved many medical students from future career problems with licensure, job applications, and insurance and hospital credentialing. Strangely, the disruptors leveled false accusations about their dean and Harvard Medical School leadership. They taped their mouths shut for media consumption to illustrate their groundless accusation of being silenced. Being told that you're not allowed to disrupt a school-wide event just because you don't like the views of an invited speaker is not infringing on one's right to speak or protest. It's merely a reminder of the university's norms of respect and public discourse at a ceremony where people with different views will be present. And with that, and that the goal of the event is a once-in-a-lifetime sacred, professionally formative ceremony, not a soapbox for maligning others as genocidal. This would be equally true if the disruptors were protesting a ceremony or speaker who does abortions or sex change operations on minors, and they were warned by their dean to follow time, place, and manner policies that prevent ceremony interference. Now, outside of narrow technical questions of what is legal or procedural violations, there's also the question of what is ethical, even if it's legally allowed. We believe that the actions of the disruptors had corrupted match day on these ethical grounds. The disruption may have intimidated many students not into even attending. Dr. Richard Schwartzstein, a faculty member with extensive experience teaching in the amphitheater where the disruption took place, told us that he estimated that about 25 to 30% of the medical school class was in attendance on that day. So a possible explanation is that the disruptors had intimidated up to 70% of their fellow students into not even attending Mass Day, therefore robbing them of one of the more meaningful and hallowed days in their professional development as doctors. So why did so many students not attend? Clear implication of what the disruptor signs and the giant banner said is that those who would attend the ceremony and hear the speaker would be, quote, complicit in genocide, like the AMA. But this is a false implication. Anyone in attendance has a right to disagree with the match day speakers or even the disruptors. Attendance at the match day ceremony by no means would signal support of genocide or any other violence. Yet so many avoided their own match day to not be painted as genocidal. This is wrong and unfair, and it's why ceremonies in classrooms have different rules and norms of respect and collegiality than those governing a more public forum on campus, where there are ubiquitous opportunities to signal one's beliefs and where others can ignore or engage as desired. As opposed to protests in a quad on campus, in a classroom, or in a once-in-a-lifetime ceremony like Match Day or commencement, we can't assume that everyone thinks the same way about the day's controversial issues. In such environments, people should not be bombarded with someone else's parochial and highly controversial belief system, especially when the event in question has nothing to do with that belief system, and the university is supposed to be non-sectarian. Of course, this would be different in a religious institution. So to do otherwise suggests a self-righteousness about one's own beliefs and a lack of humility about respecting others in attendance. If you don't agree with this, consider how you would feel about a Mass Day or commencement disruption in which students and faculty held up images of Jewish women raped on October 7th with demands for justice. How about signs demanding reparations for people killed in recent months by migrants who crossed into America illegally? Or how about signs with images of third trimester babies who were aborted? How about signs with images of people recently tortured in communist nations like North Korea? Such disruptions also threaten ethical patient caregiving. A physician must be able to connect with their patients regardless of the patient's ideology or religion. Ideologically motivated disruptions threaten the ability of patients to trust the students and physicians who engaged in the protest. In Harvard Medical School and its affiliated hospitals in general, patients, regardless of their view of how best to stop Hamas's horrors, need to have confidence in their clinicians' care, competence, and good judgment. Similarly, false accusations of suppressed speech and being complicit in genocide, and intimidating others to not attend a crucial ceremony, this undermines that confidence. Also, the disruptors probably didn't consider the Holocaust survivors and their families, some of whom attended Mass Day, others of whom are their current or future patients, who would see in the current events and in the anti-Semitic reactions resonances of pre-Holocaust discourse, blood libels, dehumanization, and racism. Indeed, this very story was brought to us by a terrified child survivor of the Holocaust who has reasonable concerns with potential quality of care at the Harvard Medical School affiliated institutions. Beyond the moral myopia towards patients and colleagues, patients may also be concerned by this display of conformity and limited critical thinking, in this case about what is historically an extraordinary complex geopolitical conundrum for physicians. As we've described in our own research, physicians were among the earliest and most enthusiastic joiners of the Nazi Party. Because of their agreeable and conscientious personalities and hierarchical training, physicians of any worldview are susceptible to succumbing to groupthink and conformity. And at Harvard, there are about 500% more liberal than conservative faculty. So this demonstration is an example of that conformity. For example, we wonder how many of the Match Day disruptors have ever heard about the racist historical roots of the Hamas Charter, the history of Islamist antisemitism, and the meetings in Berlin in 1941 between Hitler and the Jerusalem Mufti, the father of Palestinian nationalism, where Hitler confirmed that he supported the, quote, struggle against a Jewish homeland in Palestine, end quote, and had aimed at, quote, the annihilation of Jewry living in Arab space under the protection of British power, end quote. The Mufti had noted that, quote, the Arabs were Germany's natural friends because they had the same enemies as the Germans, namely the English, the Jews, and the communists, end quote. Though educated to carefully examine randomized controlled trials, the mass-day disruptors appear not able or not motivated to probe beyond the questionable statistics that Hamas cites. For instance, there's strong evidence showing that the Gaza Ministry of Health has faked its casualty numbers. This does not bode well for the disruptors' ability to go beyond confirmation bias and critically analyze quantitative data and its sources when they agree with the hypothesis presented. In addition, the disruptors likely have now considered how they may have enabled Hamas's terrorism by calling Israel's actions genocidal. Joining a revolutionary movement dedicated to the status of an entire group as, quote, oppressors has been observed before, and we must not repeat the mistakes of the 20th century, where doctors became pawns, the stooges of Nazi and communist ideology, and the practice of medicine became hijacked by revolutionary pseudo-religions. I think all can actually learn from this event. Amidst ideological fervor, it's easy to forget that academic freedom and civil discourse on campus very much depend on having reasonable time, space, and matter restrictions elaborated in policies that help, and that having such policies make the abstract right to academic freedom possible in an actually existing university. Campus rules should be enforced in content and viewpoint neutral matters, no matter who's protesting. Now, as a thought experiment, imagine if protesters were not members of the highest intersectional social justice caste on campus, and instead were heterosexual Christian males of European origin who are disrupting match day or commencement or setting up unauthorized 24/7 encampments in Harvard Yard to protest the hundreds of abortion procedures done every day at Harvard hospitals. How many hours, or should I say how many minutes, would it take for the administration to disband and sanction every last one of those persons? It's clear that in today's campus culture, rules are applied differently depending on which group one is in. If one claims the status of oppressed, one operates by more charitable rules than if one is slandered as an oppressor. This is totally illiberal and unfair and unbecoming of an institution that strives to foster academic community. When there are plenty of opportunities that exist on campus to publicly express one's moral and religious beliefs, universities do have a right, in a content-neutral manner, to narrowly safeguard the classroom, the safety and functioning of public spaces for educational purposes, and special ceremonies against disruptions that protect the possibilities for learning and professional development for all. Thank you.